How's that?
That's
That good?
perfect. That's
Good.
perfect. Yeah.
Sorry,
My
hotel room.
husband's
I'm
been
sure you
saying
hear.
I've been dressing like you because I've been wearing like
You
black
have.
leather jackets and
Wow.
sunglasses. He always says you're going all Cara Swisher on me, Couric.
Oh, well, that's a good thing, these
Yeah,
days.
exactly. All right. So, well, first of all, Cara, are you sick of talking about your book yet? Or are
No,
you
not yet. This is
excited?
the first day. Well, no, I did a bunch last week, but yes, this is the first big day. This is
Well,
the first big.
I'm very excited because everyone, I mean, I love Cara, and she's got a new book out called Burn Book, a tech love story. And honestly, reading it, I felt like I was just having a really long, fun, extended dinner with you,
Uh-huh.
hearing about really tech for the last 30 plus years.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you've had a front row seat. I love the book. It's so fun and funny, but also incredibly substantive, just like
Thank you.
you, Cara.
Thank you.
Um,
Well, 30 years, Katie. Don't try to age me. I know you try to age me all the time, but it's 30 exactly,
30
actually.
years.
Yeah.
And I found the book to be funny, smart, cheeky, and insightful. So
Thank you.
first, a quick question. Was it fun writing this, Cara?
Well, I'm 2.5 years late, actually. So, no, I didn't really want to do that. And one of the things that was hard is getting to do it, as you know from writing your memoir, right?
Right.
Getting yourself psyched. But you're like a harder worker than I am. Like, I was sort of
That is
well,
so
I'm a
not
hard worker on
true.
the things I like. How's that? And I didn't want to write a book at all. I had avoided books for a long time. I had been offered, whenever there was a Twitter book or what happened to Katie Couric at Yahoo book
Well,
or
you did write, we'll discuss that later, but you did
yeah,
write a book really early on in your career about
I
AOL,
did.
by the
I
way.
did. Then it was that was when I was in, really young and
And you
I
needed to
was
make some cabbage.
cabbage and not just cabbage, but reputation, right? And I really did think this internet thing was going to be a big deal. And nobody at that time, when that book came out in 1997, very few people were figuring this out. And so that was a different thing because I was there in Washington sitting by myself and going, this is a big revolution and people need to pay attention. So I had been the editor on that was John Karp, who now runs Simon and Schuster. He was a young guy too. We were both at the beginning of our careers. And he's the one that got me to write it, and which was interesting, the first book. And he said, these people are going to change the world, Cara. You need to write a book about them. And I was like, okay. And then in that book, I have Yahoo people, Amazon people. There's all Jeff is in that. And so he kept bugging me over the years, like, do you want to do this? I was like, no, I don't want to do a Google book or a Twitter book or whatever. But then he came to me and said, would you write a fictional book? And I said, oh, what do you mean? Like make it up? And he goes, yeah, I'll get you a fiction writer, this and that. And I said, oh, I could kill someone then, right? Like, like I could make it a murder mystery and, that murder doesn't get solved essentially. And and then I was like, I can't do that. It's not really me. And then Walt Mossberg was supposed to write a memoir of his time in tech, and I wanted him to do that, and he just decided not to. He abandoned it for his own reasons. And I said, someone's got to say what happened here, right? Someone who knew, who has notes, who has pictures, and
Has
especially
bodies, knows
has
where the
bodies,
bodies are
knows where the
buried.
bodies.
Yeah.
But not just that, it was more like we are at a cusp of another huge change. And I thought artificial general intelligence, AGI, was another line, and like just like mobile was or the internet itself was. And I thought I could end it there. Like we're on the cusp. Let me tell you what happened the first time because we're in for like a world of trouble if we don't. And that's why I did it,
I
essentially.
think one of the great things about the book is how prescient you were, Karen, how
Hmm.
you read the tea leaves, unlike really anyone else. Sounds
Hmm.
like Jonathan Karp did as well, by the
He did
way.
too. Yeah, he did.
But before we talk about sort of the business writ large, I want to talk a little bit about you personally because I
Hmm.
found some of the stuff about your family so moving. You lost your
Hmm.
dad to complications from a brain aneurysm when you were
Hmm.
just 5 years old. Remembering that morning, I think it was a sunny Saturday. I think you
Hmm.
described it that way,
Yeah. Hmm.
and your brother knocking on his door and how
Hmm.
traumatizing that was, and also about your stepfather. And
Hmm.
I'm curious in retrospect, and you write a little bit about this in the book, and I want people to buy the book, so we don't want to
Hmm.
tell everything that's in the book. But
Hmm.
but how were you shaped by the father you really didn't know very well? I think you
No,
knew
but I
him better
did.
posthumously than
Yes.
oh, really?
Yeah, because here's the deal. I have a lot of kids. You have a lot of kids. I when I see when my son, who's 21 now, turned 5, I I was over 5 years old when my father got sick, when it was a couple months older. My son knew me so well at 5. My daughter, who's 4, and I chit chat all the time. My 2-year-old and I chit chat. I realized the devastation then, like, oh my God, I did know him really well, right? And so I just don't remember it. That's very different than I didn't. And so I had thought that because I was so young and didn't remember, it didn't have an impact. But the minute I had kids, it was, and I actually had a stroke very close to when my older kids were that age, right? And I
So
thought,
scary.
it was, but I think it really was a formative experience. And that was another thing I didn't want to write about. I mean, you wrote your memoir and it was a lot about work and stuff like that, but I had a very hard time. I don't, in my case, I don't think I was as interesting as the people I was writing about. And so I was very reticent to write about my personal life. I never had done it. And he pressed me to do that, to add it in. And then I realized, this is a journey story. I'm Nick in The Great Gatsby. That's who I am. So
And
you
I
need
love
to
that you
know.
used that quote too, by the way, at the
I
beginning
did.
of the
Yeah.
book. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tell for me, but I'm that character. And you need to know a little bit about Nick and where he came from so you understand my journey,
And
essentially.
I also think your understanding of this brave new world, you have to understand sort of the person who's telling the story. And obviously
Right.
that's
Yeah.
you. And your
Right.
dad sounded like such a
Ah,
gem
great
of a
guy. Jim.
person,
Hmm.
a doctor,
Hmm.
right?
In the Navy. In the Navy.
And yes, and just sounds like an incredible man. And then
Hmm.
your mom goes and marries a stepfather. And I think you used
Casually cruel.
alliteration.
Casually cruel.
Didn't you use a cascade of casual cruelties, I
Cascade of
believe?
casual cruelties. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was.
exactly.
Yeah.
And how did well let me go back to my original question. How did both men in retrospect shape you and the person you became?
Well, my dad was, every look, when people die young, people get to make them into heroes, right? That's true. No matter how you do, the memories sort of get much more burnished. And you had your husband died. But we know who they were. But my dad, I have to say, I wrote a story about, I moved his body from where it was buried in New York a long time. I wrote a story in the Washington Post about it, to West Virginia after my grandmother, who was devastated by his death. Asked me to, she was dying of leukemia, and she asked me to move him. And I did this. I wrote a story about it. And after I wrote it, it went in, I was young. I was in my mid 20s, I guess, when I wrote it. And I got so many letters from people who knew him, which was really something. Like, it was really something. And including, like, I got a young doctor who he had a
Trained?
young African trained, who had tutored him. He tutored
Hmm.
her. I didn't know this. I got an email from a Jewish doctor who said he's the only one who was said cut the anti-Semitic bullshit, which was really, I was sort of like, what a good guy this guy is. Gay couple. He's the only people he treated us like we were a real couple. This was way back in the 60s. And friends of his, an ex-girlfriend of his, all this stuff. And it was really fascinating to learn about him. And so one of
That's
the
a
things
wonderful
that
gift for your kids, by the
it
way.
is 100%. And one of the things that it did teach me is that you really don't, you have to understand impact of people on your life, even if they're not there. The absence of my father was as important as his presence, right? In terms of losing him. And then my mom did marry someone who was not nice. And I was sort of, it wasn't Cinderella. We're not in an episode, but to think about losing someone so precious and then having to deal with a very tough person afterwards. And your mom is part of it, right? And so, um, she had a reason. She's a young woman with 3 kids. Like, I get it. I get it. But he was just, I'll tell you, he did teach me about strategy. He was brilliant. And
He
so,
taught you how
like,
to play Risk, right?
backgammon and
And
backgammon. I'm
backgammon.
really good. I won't play it anymore because I get really mean when I play it. It's really funny. I learned how to be tough, in that regard. And you had to be when you're left with almost raising yourself in a weird way.
Sounds like your
Also,
dad. Go ahead.
in an expensive environment. It's not like I was like, I had to scrabble eat food. It was I mean, I grew up in a very lovely environment, but it doesn't make it any less lonely or sad. So,
It sounds like your dad gave you, though, maybe the ability or this
mhm.
instinct you have to stand up for what's right from
Yes,
those
I think
letters you
so.
got.
Yeah, absolutely. And also my mom's mom played a big role in my life, was very supportive and loving. And I later got much closer to my father's mom, All kinds of reasons we didn't spend as much time with him. But you know, I had a lot of support from family. We have a big Italian family, so there was that.
You didn't talk
But
about
still,
your mom that much in the book.
I didn't. That's the next book, Katie.
Why not?
A
It's
tough
complicated.
relationship. It's complicated, you know. I think how funny you're pressing exactly what you shouldn't, but that's okay. That's Katie Couric. Um, I have a complex relationship with her, continue to this day, and I think there's a lot of me that doesn't forgive her for him. I guess, um, you know, I think there's probably that element to it. She's, you know, we've had a very up and down relationship, including me being gay. I mean, she's come around well, but initially she was terrible. And so that was another thing. I knew I was gay at 4 or 5 years old. Like I knew it. And
How did you
that was
know
it.
it?
Just did. I don't know what to tell you. I just was
Yeah.
like, uh-huh, that's what I am. And I was kind of proud of it. It was weird, except for all the messages you were getting from media at the time, which, as you know, predatory lesbians, all drunk, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. And gay people bad. You know, that was during my era,
Right. And
pre-AIDS.
mine
It was,
too. Mine
yeah.
too. And one of the things I marvel at always is I think sometimes people don't, not that we don't have miles to go before we sleep, but people don't recognize how different it is. Not
Oh,
perfect
mm-mm.
for gay people in this country. And,
Right.
you know, I was thinking about, you know, you're a little younger than I am, Cara,
Mhm.
maybe a lot younger than I am. And I was
No, I don't
thinking
think so.
about how you wanted to go into the CIA. And back
I did.
then,
The
which would
military.
have been the 80s, right? When you
Yes.
graduated,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
You know, people forget about don't ask, don't tell. They don't forget about the fact that Obama actually initially didn't support gay marriage. They
Yeah.
don't
Neither the
remember
Clintons. The
how,
Clintons were
right,
don't ask, don't
exactly.
tell, by the
How,
way.
no, I know for the
Yeah.
military, but then
Hmm.
Obama, it's just sort of shocking to see
Yeah.
that he had to evolve, and thank goodness he did during his term, but during his presidency. But you couldn't be in the CIA or the military, which is what you
Right.
wanted to
I
do, which
did.
would have been so great.
I would have been a kick-ass admiral,
You
Katie.
would
I would
have,
have
you
been.
would
I
have.
would have
And
been. I would have been like,
tell me why, what stopped you?
I didn't want to lie. I didn't, it was, and then before Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which is already offensive enough, right? Like, first of all, I ask and I tell, like, so that's kind of hard. Which I can't even believe they passed that. I just, when you think about it today, you're like, are you kidding me? And
Talk
at the
about
time,
why that's so offensive for people who
well,
might
because
not remember.
they don't get to ask, but, and you don't say, because if you say, you have to leave. So you have to lie. Everybody's lying. And it's just, it creates you want to create, you know, community within the military. You want to create collegiality and the kind of things you need to have a strong military. And you're all lying to each other. It's like, I might as well be with my family, right? You know, the kind of thing. And the furtiveness is what is bad about it. And before Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I think a lot of straight people thought, well, we're being nice. We're not going to ask now or hold it against them. But asking you to lie is just like, this is who I am, and I have to tell you I'm not, or pretend I'm not. It was just so ridiculous. And they thought that was nice compared to putting you in jail for it or throwing you out of the military with a dishonorable discharge, which is what happened. And so but it wasn't just in the military, it was everywhere. You had to be furtive. I can't, you know, today is a full-on assault of gay people, and that's where they're headed, gay marriage. But they're doing it in plain sight now. They're saying they don't like gay people, they don't like trans people, they don't like LG. They're not even hiding their kind of thing. Before it was very furtive the way you were, you know, if you're gay, then, you know, people knew to keep quiet or else kind of thing. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I'm not that person. And so I did another job.
So you decided to go into journalism. You went to Georgetown. You didn't love it. You wanted to go to Stanford, where your brother went. But you did love your history courses. You write, my
Mhm.
focus was on propaganda and how groups like the Nazis use media and communications tools to twist facts, radicalize their populace, and demonize the targeted population. Obviously, Hitler and his henchmen had conducted a masterclass in evil, but what struck me was how easily people could be manipulated by fear and rage and how facts could be destroyed without repercussions.
Mhm.
Did you ever imagine your major would come in so handy? I
Yeah,
mean, that's
you know,
so
yes.
scary.
Yes, because when I saw the internet for the first time, I was like, that was one of my first thoughts, besides cool, right? Whoa, this is really interesting, especially the World Wide Web when the hyperlinks. I was like, oh, look at that. Um, was the ability to manipulate it. You saw it. It was right. You couldn't miss what you could do with it from a negative point. I'm one of those people, and I think that was one of the things I write about in the book, which is I anticipate consequences. I'm good at that,
Hmm.
right? If this, then that. And that was what I wanted to do in the military intelligence is sort of be like, Homeland, but 100% less mentally challenged. Um, but I like that. Like, what's going to happen here if I know this input? And you know that in reporting, you do that. You sit there and you're like, when you're doing an interview, you're like, strategize it, right?
Right.
If I say this, they might say this, then I'll say this. You do things like that. And so I really liked that. I was really attracted to that. And so I think reporting is like that, very much like that. And so it was really easy for me to move to understand what the internet would be when I saw it, because I was like, oh, this is a really good propaganda tool, like
And that was
immediately.
when you were on a fellowship at Duke and
Hmm.
you had this
Hmm.
aha moment. I
Yeah.
think you were in the library and this idea that you could just digitize the world, right?
You could, yeah, a book. In this case, it was a book, but it could have been anything. And I think I did see that. And I had already been attracted to like the mobile phone that they had at the Post. Every
Right.
news
The big
organization.
clunky one
Yeah,
that
yeah. There
was
was
like
one in
the
a
size of a
suitcase.
shoebox.
That, and then there was the shoebox one. Then there was the Gordon Gecko one, and then it got smaller, smaller. But I was attracted to it. I was like, mobile communications. I like it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, why wouldn't we have these? Everybody have them as a reporter. Why be in the newsroom? And so I was super attracted to that. I was always obsessed. I know it sounds crazy with that teletype machine. Did you ever visit the Post back in the day? You might have.
No, but I mean, honey, I had
You had
teletype
a
machines
teletype
at
machines, right? Yeah,
ABC.
right.
My
ABC.
job was changing the purple ribbon, and they even had little
I
white
had a,
gloves so
yeah,
you
yeah.
wouldn't stain your fingers. I mean, this
Yeah.
is how old
Yep.
I am.
Yes, me too. I delivered the page proofs down to the printers at the Washington Post when I was a news aide. And but that teletype machine, I hated it. I was like, why is it here? Why it's going to be on the not the internet, but it can go on the computer. I kept like, and even when I was at Columbia, they were teaching us to type on a typewriter. I'm like, why are we on a typewriter? There's a computer. Like, there's no need to put anything on paper. And it wasn't because I like trees so much, although that's a benefit, added benefit, but it was so onerous. Like, and then you use your red pen, and I was like, you don't need
Or
to
the
use a red pen.
whiteout and
White,
the,
whiteout. I
and
liked
remember
whiteout.
you could
I miss
do a
whiteout.
reverse thing. And
Mhm.
by the way, a little known fact, Michael Nesmith, one of the monkeys, his
Invented,
mother
yeah.
invented whiteout. But then remember you had a backspace thing that you could
That's
white
right.
out on
Years
your
later.
typewriter
That was
as
a big
well.
innovation. That was an innovative
Yeah.
for like we're going down Old Lady Highway. But
But you
but
saw technology, the existing technology, and you
mhm.
always thought there's got to be a better way. And then the internet
Often.
comes up,
Yeah.
right? And you're like,
Yeah.
holy shit, this is the better
Yes.
way.
It is. And
But
but I did see the negatives. I was like, wow, if Hitler had this, that would be scary, right? And
yeah,
bad people. I always was thinking, what would bad people do to this?
well, I think that benefited from your major, from what you
Mhm.
studied in college,
100%.
I think you applied that. I want to talk more about the internet in a moment, but I want to ask you about, I had so much fun reading about, like, as you describe yourself as a nuisance. I think probably
Hmm.
people have other choice words, Cara,
Hmm.
to describe
Yes,
you
they
in your
do. They
early,
do.
early days and
And
even
today.
now, and
And
even
today.
now. But
Mhm.
I loved how you worked your way, how you got a job at the Washington Post by complaining about how an article was written. I
Mhm.
love the fact that you were when you told John McLaughlin the infamous Morton
Morton.
blow hard
Remember
of the
that?
McLaughlin group that he
Hmm.
was going to lose power because he was getting old, but you said it in a much more eloquent, funny way. The
Hmm.
way you kind of interacted with Don Graham, the publisher of the Post, who
Lovely guy.
yeah, lovely, but almost unnecessarily humble, I think,
He
is
is.
sort of the way he comes
I'll tell him
across.
that. You're
Um,
unnecessarily humble. Be a little more
but
arrogant, Tom.
to suggesting to marketers of major newspapers that the best way to get younger readers was to quote tape a joint between every single page.
Yeah,
And
that
it
was a good
struck
piece of
me,
advice.
how did you have such confidence at such an early age? I mean, we talked about your dad standing up for what
Right.
was right, but you were such a baller even in your
Yeah.
20s, Cara.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, you called out bullshit, and it was risky. I know that
Hmm.
you thought John McLaughlin was going to fire you when you
Hmm.
gave him a
The
piece of your
toast.
mind. Yeah,
Yeah.
which was so
Yeah. Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
But he didn't. He laughed, but where does that come from? Because
Part of
honestly, I
me
want
thinks
a
it's
slice of that.
lesbian. I think it's a lesbian thing. I think
You do?
you're an honorary lesbian, Katie,
Thank
as you
you.
know. As you know, I've told you that, but you have elements of it. And I'm not going to ask any personal questions, Katie. It's up to you what you want to do. But it does have a little to do with it. Like I didn't have to seek the approval of men. And there's an old joke, like, I don't know why they think lesbians hate men. They don't have to sleep with them, right? Like, why would I? And I had great brothers, and I had a lot of really good experiences with men. And so I just think I was like that from a young age. I was like, this is stupid. I don't understand it. And I wouldn't be able to not say it. And I don't know, maybe that's
You have no
genetic.
filter, I guess, right?
I don't. Well, I have a filter. I'm not unnecessarily cruel to, I don't have a filter of people above me. Like I find
Hmm.
myself constantly saying what's everybody's thinking, right? And as I've gotten older, I'm like, I sort of moved to cranky old lady very early in my life, right? Like, what? Huh? Huh? Or Larry David or that kind of thing. And I don't know why that was, but I was like that. And especially when there was like, it didn't make any sense to me. Like when they were like, and it's interesting you mentioned the word confidence because I've had a lot of experience. Why are you so confident? Why aren't other people confident? Like it's never that question. It's that as we have to all be not confident, especially women. I didn't
Hmm.
ever understood that. I was like, I never said I was great at things I wasn't great at, but I also never said I wasn't great at things I was great at, right?
Hmm.
Like I didn't go, I'm so good at basketball. But if I was good at writing, which I was, I'd say it. And a lot of people, especially men, I'm sorry to say this is what happens, but women do it too. They were like, well, you shouldn't be so confident. I'm like, why? What precisely why not? Well, because people will think you're too confident. I'm like, what is it's like saying people will think you're too stunning or people will think you're too smart. Like, why do that? And it was just irritating. I found it irritating on every level. And I especially, I think women really get the brunt of that. Like, and I didn't care like if they said I was bossy because I wasn't going to marry any of them. Like, okay, well, good thing we're not getting married
And by the
because I'm
way, that's a
bossy.
that's a great tool for a reporter.
Right.
You're
It is.
challenging people. I know you don't like the term speaking truth to power, and I think it's sort
I
of
don't.
overused.
Hmm.
And it's insinuating, as you write, that all power is bad, and it isn't
Hmm.
necessarily, but it comes in handy. And I think early on we were talking about your understanding of the internet.
Hmm.
You saw very clearly the Washington Post was in deep doo doo, as they
I
say,
was.
because of the classified ads and
Not just
how.
that, I covered retail before, and
Oh,
I saw
right. And
Walmart,
Garfinkel's.
Garfinkel's,
Garfinkel's. I used to
Garfinkel's.
shop
You grew up
at
there. Sure you
Garfinkel's
did.
with
You
my
probably had lunch.
mom.
Probably had
No,
lunch in the rotunda.
we were not the ladies who lunch crowd. I had
Yeah.
a pretty modest upbringing, but
Hmm.
my mom
Hmm.
once in a while would go to Garfinkel's and we would
Hmm.
shop there. And I loved that store. And you
Explain
write
what it
about
was.
it
It was an
closing.
elegant. I
Yeah, it
wrote
was.
that closing. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
sad.
I think there were only two, weren't they? Or weren't they just in DC? Because there
Yeah, it
was
was
one
small.
downtown
It was a
DC.
local retailer. Same thing with Hex. Hex was a
Right.
local
Yes,
retailer.
I
There's
bought my first bra at Hex.
Oh, how nice to know, Katie.
Thanks.
So Hex, Garfinkel's, there was Giant Food, Heckinger's. There
Right.
was a bunch of local retailers, and I covered the decline of all of them for the Post. That was my beat because I covered the Haft family, who you also knew, Crown
Right.
Book, Track Auto,
Exactly.
Drug,
Exactly. Bobby.
and Bobby Kotick, all the Kotick,
No, no,
all of
no.
them. That's
Bobby
Kotick.
Half.
Sorry, Bobby. Oh my God, poor Bobby Kotick, Bobby Haft. And so I really did cover that, and I could see that, and at the time the culprit was Walmart. It came in all the big box retailers, and Walmart was the most prominent, and we're putting those companies out of business. And they were highly technical, by the way. Walmart was. And I was paying a lot of attention to their use of technology, but then I thought, well, if display advertising goes, and then I saw the classifieds. I was like, oh, that's Craigslist is going to put this out of business. And then third, when the internet really started seeing news, I was like, oh, news is free. A lot of it is. A lot of what's in the Washington Post is free. I was like, that's every single economic underpinning of this place. And therefore, their costs are too high immediately. Their revenue will drop out and then curtains. So,
Why do you think so many people were and I had some foresight, not as much
mhm.
as you did. I
You
wish
did.
actually you and I had talked more about the business side of
Mhm.
journalism. But why do you think there were so many people in the industry who didn't want to see the writing on the wall? Is it because they wanted to protect their business model at all costs, that they were older, they were just trying to reach retirement? What was it? Because I remember being at CBS, Cara, and saying
Mhm.
to the digital people, hey, we really have to
Quincy,
lean it.
Quincy Smith, right?
Yeah, Quincy, but also there was sort of a team at
Mhm.
CBS News. Like, we
Mhm.
really have to lean into this. I want to do online interviews. Let's
Mhm.
stay covering the conventions longer
Yeah.
online and direct people to go online to watch our
Mhm.
conversations.
Mhm.
And so I feel like I was a bit ahead of the curve, but people looked at me like I had three heads.
They did. They did because they couldn't understand, everything was sort of handed you. And it wasn't just in media. It was also record companies. Like, here's an album. What if you just want a song? It's sort of like Coke saying a 64-ounce bottle is all you'll be getting. And if you don't want that, you don't have a glass, you're screwed, essentially. We're not going to sell it in cans. No other product was sold at the convenience of the seller as much as media, right? At whatever system they wanted, they would do. And so I was always
And they
like,
controlled it back then, right?
that's right. Yeah. Because they felt like it. I used to get arguments over the 5 o'clock deadline. Why is it five? That's me being, irritating care. I was like, why shouldn't it be seven? Or why shouldn't it be all the time? Or why not when it just happens? Why not just, if it's a two, let's put it up at two, right? And they're like, we're not the AP. And I'm like, no, but people are going to get their news right then. And therefore, you're going to be late if you're not like the AP, or why don't you do more? There's all of these behind the scenes things. And it seemed like an opportunity to me more than a negative, and they resisted it with such vehemence. That was something to see, to watch the resistance.
And frustrating and hard to
Mhm.
know. But I think it's risky to jump to a different business model and potentially cannibalize the product you're
Yeah.
putting out, So I think there
Well,
were
guess what
some,
happened? They got
yeah,
pushed, and they were too late to get technical expertise. And guess who owns digital advertising now, which is really the only advertising, except for some display advertising. But for the most part, most of the money has shifted. One of the things I saw, and Scott Galley reminded me this today, I remember when TV usage was 7% of the attention and 30% of the advertising. And internet was 30% of the usage and 7% and I thought, that doesn't make any sense. And of course, it's gone like this, right? Why should the thing people are on not get the bulk of the advertising, right? And I think I don't know what numbers they were looking at, but anybody could have seen it coming. It's not like I was some genius in
I
any
remember
way.
Jeff Zucker used to talk about analog dollars and
Dollars,
digital pennies,
dimes,
right?
dimes, digital dimes. Yeah.
Digital dimes,
Yeah.
and it just didn't seem like the money would be there. But if you read if you have any
Well,
foresight, you know that it's going to. Do you think the big mistake was that media organizations gave their content away for free? Was that
no,
the
not no. They just had their economics were out of line with where the business was going. Yes, they would be digital dimes, but someday they would be a lot of digital dimes, right? And but until then, you had costs. You all made so much money. Like your contracts were crazy. And I think you were
those days are
valuable.
over, by the
Those days
way?
are over, by the way. You might have been valuable, but were the other 12 people valuable? You know what I mean? Like, should they have gotten millions of dollars? Probably not. Like, one of the things I tried to do early on, because one, I was irritating, and two, I was irritated. And so I always matched myself with my revenues. I was very aware of what my revenues were and my profits, not just my revenues, my profits. Because then if they're like, we want you to do this, I'm like, no, I'm making money over here. Leave me alone. Like, if I'm making money, you cannot bother me, essentially. And so if you were aware of your actual contribution, and I know a lot of journalists are like, you shouldn't put a number on it. Well, guess what? Someone's putting a number on it somewhere. So it might as well be you. Once I knew what my value was, and I know I sound like Mika Brzezinski there, but if you don't know your value, you don't know what you can do or what you
That's
can't
good.
do.
That's good professional advice, I
Yeah.
think, for anyone to kind of
Yeah.
have a really keen understanding of not only what they're making, but what they're making the other people as well, right?
Right. Regular people have to do it every day. Hourly workers, if they're not keeping up, they don't get the money. Like that's the problem, is that a lot of it was supported by other things that no one ever saw or thought of. And the minute digital, which it's hitting obviously it hit the blue collar workers, a lot of the manufacturing innovation happened, or farming. It started to hit white collar workers. That's now everybody's screaming like, oh, can you believe this? I'm like, yeah, I can, because it makes sense for it to move up the food chain in that regard.
You moved to San Francisco, and it sounds like when you got when you got to the West Coast, the way you described these startup big
Hmm.
tech companies, you talk about being like kindergartners and
Hmm.
playgrounds and
Hmm.
free stuff and ping pong tables, which made me laugh because that
Food.
was sort of that when I went to Yahoo, I was like, this is such a weird vibe
It
and such a
is. Yeah.
weird environment. Can you talk about that?
Yeah.
The
I'm
vibe of
curious, did
these
they
early
make you do
startups.
fun things, force fun? Did they force fun upon you?
Well,
Marissa loved that
they
stuff.
had the yodeling thing, which I just wouldn't
Oh,
do. And as you
yeah.
said, that irritating exclamation point.
What is with the X? Stop with it. Did they make you yodel? They tried to get you to yodel.
I didn't yodel.
Okay.
I just honestly coming there was just such a culture shock for me, Kara. I
It
just could
is.
not really like. I didn't bleed purple as a lot of folks at Yahoo
Right.
did, and good on them if that's what they
Right.
wanted. But why was it so juvenile in so many of these startups? You talk about Mark Andreessen and all these
Hmm.
other places. Tell me
Yeah.
about that.
Well, it was interesting because I think one of them started doing it, which was Google, was the one that really pioneered like the primary colors, if you notice, like it's very juvenile. A lot of their parties had slip and slides and bouncy houses and things like that. And I was like, and it sort of I gave the example in the book is when I went to Excite, which is now gone, but it was one of the search
When they have the
companies.
red slide?
The red slide. Did you go down the red slide? You might have.
No, hell no, I didn't go down the
Okay, all
red
right,
slide. I
okay.
just
So what?
remember it from the book.
Yeah, yeah. So there was a red slide, and it was between the second and first of all, they had a fake garage door so they could performatively be a garage. And I was like, this is a office. Why are we having a garage? Because it shows us origins. I'm like, but it's not the actual garage door, right? Like I was, that was me. I was like, I don't, okay, sure. And they had the slide that they wanted between the floors, and they're like, everyone gets on the slide. I'm like, I hated slides at 5 years old. I'm like, by this time I'm in my late 30s. I was like, I'm not getting on your friggin' slide. Like, forget it. And it was, it's kind of forced fun. There was a lot of
Right.
forced fun, like forced
Why is
joviality.
that, you think? Or
I
is
think
it
a lot
because
of
they
them
were
didn't have social lives, didn't have real social lives. A lot of them, a lot of the nerds really were like nerding it out during high school. And I was like, that wasn't fun in sixth grade.
but
Like,
I also think they were trying to show they were so anti-corporate or anti-establishment,
yes,
right?
yeah, that was part. It was the clothing, the clothing, the soft clothing, the soft, everything's soft. All the chairs were soft. All the desks were
Beanbag chairs.
soft.
In fact,
Beanbag.
I laughed when I felt like you were channeling your own version of Jennifer Melfi in The Sopranos. You write, quote, tech is littered with men whose parents, typically fathers, were either cruel or absent. By the time they grew to be adults, many were unhappy and often had some disgruntled tale of being misunderstood before they were proved triumphantly right. Most of
Mhm.
all, the damaged ones shared one sad attribute. They all seemed achingly lonely.
I
More,
agree. Yeah.
please.
Yeah, well, I'll never forget. I was at two things. When I was at one of those Vanity Fair Oscar parties here, and there was a year they let all the techies in. Marissa was there, Sergey was there, a whole bunch of them, and I was there to see the celebrities. Like I got invited. I'm like, yay, get to look at celebrities, fantastic. I'm going over to look. It's Daniel Day-Lewis. I'm headed over that way. And they were all like, Cara, hey, come talk to us. I'm like, no, get the fuck away from me. I'm like, I don't want to talk to you. I know you. Like, I'm talking to the celebrity people. Oh, look, it's Robert De Niro. I'm going over to Robert De Niro. And Sergey was wearing a set of Google Glass. Remember they had the first
Oh yeah,
heads up
Sergey
display thing.
Brin, who the
Brin,
founder of yeah,
one of the founders.
right.
There's two co-founders. Larry Page is the other one, and he was wearing it at the party, and I was like, he's like, no one's talking to me. And I go, well, take that off your face. They don't like pictures that they don't know are being taken. It's not cool here among these people. Like, it's cool elsewhere, but it's not cool here. And he's like, whoa, what should I talk to him about? And I said, tell them you're a billionaire. They do like money. They do. These people seem to like, and maybe you'll make a move. You'll pay for a movie. I don't know. That'll work. I'm sure one of these people will talk to you for
They're
that.
just very socially awkward.
Right, awkward. And so that was part of it. And then, the Not all of them had bad parents, by the way, not all of them, but it's interesting. Steve Jobs was adopted, was fostered, and then his parents went on to have another kid and didn't come back and get him. Larry Ellison, same thing. Elon's obviously, that's the famous story of the bad dad. And they all had kind of social awkward issues kind of thing. And so you'd feel like they didn't know quite how to talk to people, some of them. And that was lots of reasons. Some of them are on the spectrum. Obviously, it's a famous thing in tech. But they also seemed to, I don't know, it just I felt like I was in a constant Janice Ian song. Like they got picked last at basketball or something, and and it was interesting to watch. Now, not all of them. Some of them, Brian Chesky from Airbnb is quite witty and funny. And
I think had a, I mean, from what I understand, a wonderful upbringing, close to
he
his
did.
family.
His family's wonderful. Let me just
Yeah.
say, best parents of the internet are Brian Chesky's parents. And one of the things that they also had is if they had an interest outside of tech, some of them were just totally tech focused. So say Steve Jobs, he loved design, he loved fonts, he was very well read. He had cultural references while others didn't. And so that was nice. But then others didn't. That's all they could talk about 24/7 was tech, right? And they didn't have other interests, or their interests were just awkward. You know what I mean?
I'm not going to make you tell the story of the baby shower, but folks, the book is worth it just to read about the baby shower and what the host expected their guests to wear. And thankfully,
that was almost the first chapter of the book, but I decided to go more serious.
That was so funny. That painted such a picture for me. And I love the fact that you and Gavin Newsom refused to go along with the costume idea.
Oh, he had a nice suit on.
Yeah. Do you like Gavin Newsom?
I do, very much so. I think I thought he was terrific this weekend on Meet the Press, but
do you think he'd be a good president?
I do. I think he would. He's very, he's got a lot, he's a man who's been through difficult times and understands them. I think he suffers from, he's so handsome and smooth that people don't trust him. I do. I think, look, here's why this is the main reason I like Gavin Newsom, among many, because he's really intelligent and smart and sharp, is because when he passed the gay marriage thing, when he was in San Francisco, I have to tell you, he did not have to do that, right? And it really hurt. He was on the way up on the political thing. He was sort of riding high, and he was laid low by doing that. And I don't think there's been another politician who took a risk like that on something that wasn't. And that I really appreciated that I nearly named one of my kids Gavin, because I was like, nobody did that. Like, no straight guy who was on his way to the top floor of the political spectrum did that. And he suffered for many, many years for doing so. He's just I like him. And he was also the reason I saw him so much is because he was so early to tech thing. He was always around with the tech, it was hard not to be, as mayor of San Francisco, right? Not to be seeing all the boom in the market because of what was happening in tech. And he was onto it really early. And he tried all kinds of things. Some of them didn't work, but I appreciated the effort. At least he was paying attention.
You write about a lot of these fascinating figures who have become, in a way, the rock stars of modern life in terms of the business world. Yeah. And you knew early on the unintended consequences of this, huge transition into the digital age. But I'm curious, do you think that some of these other folks like Mark Zuckerberg, they just didn't think about it? I mean, I know that their motto is move fast and break things, or was, and you write a lot about that. Was it arrogance or willful ignorance that they never contemplated that? Or was it just like, we're just going to make more money?
Well, I think it was the reason the first line of the book is it was capitalism after all, is because that's the first line of the book. I want to point out this was about nothing but money. Like, let's be clear. And I think they would have they had a very, again, performative nature. Of the many performative nature things was, we're in it for everybody. We're here to save humanity. And initially it's very attractive. And then it's like, wait, that is so narcissistic. I think it sort of reached its height when I was interviewing Elon Musk, and he said, right, this was 2018 maybe. And I was at headquarters of Tesla, and he had just gone through a very difficult period for Tesla. It almost closed down, and he'd gotten a government loan, and they had pushed their way through, as many EV makers are doing now. There's a valley of death there. And he had, he had some emotional times. There was a very famous interview he did with the New York Times where he seemed like he was crying. He denies he was crying, but seemed like he was crying. I could see it. And he said to me in this interview something along the lines of, if Tesla, I said, why are you so emotional about this? And then he did the whole I'm sleeping on the factory floor, which is like such a drama queen. Like, come on, you can be in a bed. It doesn't take that long to get to a bed. Like he has to, if he's not there, the entire thing falls apart. Oh my God. And I remember thinking that at the time, and I just let him talk. And he goes, I thought if Tesla didn't make it, humanity was doomed. That's literally what he said. Like, essentially, I forget the whole quote, but it was like that. And I was like, what? Like, really? I don't know. Seems like if you go, it doesn't really matter. Like, you're not the linchpin. And it wasn't until just recently when I was interviewing Ben Mesrick, who did The Social Network, he just wrote a book about Twitter, where I kept thinking, is he just a giant narcissist and now a malevolent narcissist? And Ben said he thinks everything is a video game. And he's talked to me about simulation, Elon has this whole theory, like a lot of them, about we're in a simulation and none of us is real. And he is the main player. It's called Ready Player One or whatever. And I don't play video games, but it makes perfect sense. Oh, so the rest of us are fungible. That's why he can say nasty things to everybody, because he's the main player. And so he can shoot anyone he wants. He can, like, his version of this game.
Right.
And I don't play them, but I know enough about them. But that everybody is, when my kids, there was that one game that was, I can't remember, one of the shoot 'em up games. I wouldn't let my kids play.
Call of Duty or something.
One of them. No, it was the city one, the one in the city. Anyway, I don't know. I don't play them. And there was a point where they were shooting women. It was, they were shooting women, or they could shoot women or something like that, which I was like, I don't like them shooting anybody, but I guess it's a shooting game. And they were like, well, Mom, you can't shoot people without guns. And I was like, but you can shoot them. It was just like this ridiculous argument about it. And what it created in a lot of, particularly men, was this idea that they're the hero of the story, right? Except the story is pretty ugly, right? What if you're not the hero, you're the villain of the story? And
is that why they cloaked everything in this notion that they're saving humanity?
Saving humanity. I was like, we don't need you to save us. Thank you. Like that. I don't know why they needed to say that. Instead of, can you imagine, like, I don't know, like an insurance company. We're here to save humanity by giving you a policy. Like, they'd be laughed out of the room, right? Or a Wall Street person. I'm here to save humanity by giving you a checking account. And if you don't get a checking account, all of commerce will stop. Like, that's kind of technically true, but like, you're making a car, right? Right? You're making a dating service. You're making you're just making something. And for some reason they have to make it more vaunted than that. And that has to do with their own personal traumas, I think, in a lot of ways.
Who do you think is going to be upset with this book? I mean, you write about Jeff Bezos. You write about, obviously, Mark Zuckerberg. You say, from the moment we met, Mark seemed to think of me and maybe all the press as an adversary.
He did.
The first thing he said to you was, I heard you think I'm an asshole.
He did say that to me. Yes. I mean, he was insecure, and yeah, I could see it. He had a kind of a jerky reputation. I happen to like Mark in that, compared to many of the people I covered. He's actually tries. It's just that he shouldn't have this much responsibility, and he's made a series of mistakes that at some point he really needs to stop. Right? Like, he's gotten so many at bats, and he keeps.
What do you think is the biggest mistake he's made?
He doesn't have a sense that he perhaps has designed it in a way that's damaging. Like, I get the pluses of it. I'm not averse to saying a lot of it is really cool. What I am averse to saying is, there's been a rise in the self-esteem issues around teenage girls at the same time as the rise of social media. Do you think you can't prove it? I'm like, you know what? Everyone suddenly got fat after Twinkies. I can't prove it, but I believe it's because of Twinkies. Like, you know what I mean? Or processed foods. Or there's been a sudden rise in cancer here because of, and you're like, you can make some what the internet has done to us, the way they've designed it as a casino, has made us addicted, and it's made it necessary. So we can't live without it. And the COVID pushed this through really quickly, like that we needed it. So you can't live without it because you really can't because of work or whatever, communications, everything else. You also can't stop looking at it. It's really, and Tristan Harris, who I think you interviewed, he was a product manager. He knew what he was making. He was making a casino.
And he quit.
Yes, push that button. You want to push that button. And anyone with even 5 seconds on TikTok gets it. You can't get out. It's really hard to look away.
Not only addicted, Cara, but also obviously more and more tribal, and the country
Mm-hmm.
so polarized. And,
Mm-hmm.
getting back to your original calling as a journalist, and something that I've done for many years,
Mm-hmm.
is it is it is very difficult to convince people of the facts, or to
Yeah.
even have them open their eyes to other issues. I
Well,
did
that's
an interview
propaganda.
I did an interview with Mike McFall, the former ambassador
Mm-hmm.
to Russia, all about
Mm-hmm.
Navalny and about
Mm-hmm.
aid to Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
The comments were so, why aren't you talking about the border? Why aren't you talking about the border? And that's what people are reading about, hearing on Fox News 24/7. I know your mom's
Mm-hmm.
a big Fox
She
News
is.
aficionado.
One of the things that drives me crazy, I mean, I'll use my mom as an example. I think I've told you this, is I did an interview with Hillary Clinton. I've done several of them. You have done many. And my mom called me the next day and she goes, "Oh, now this was Fox News. She's not an online person. It doesn't matter. It's the same, it's the repetitive nature of addictive things, media." And she said, "Oh, I can't believe what Hillary said about people like me." And I was like, "What did she say
The
today?" I thought,
deplorables thing.
no, I thought it was something else. I had just done an interview. It had dropped. I thought she had tweeted something. I don't know. She's very clever on the Twitter. And so I said, "Oh, what did she say?" And my mom started repeating it back to me. And I was like, "That sounds familiar, but not right." It's like it's a twisted version of my interview. And I realized they had taken my interview and restated it in an inaccurate way, but they used pieces of it to create a puzzle. I mean, a building that wasn't what I built, right? And I said, "Mom, that was my interview. She didn't say that." She goes, "Oh, she did." And I was like, No, she didn't. I did the interview. I'm your daughter, and I'm telling you, she didn't." And she's like, "Oh, you're wrong. She did." And I'm like, "All right, this is what we're going to do. You're going to go listen to it, and then you're going to call me back." And she went to listen to it. She called me back. She goes, "Okay, she didn't say it, but her emails." And I literally was like, "All right then." And Jimmy Kimmel did it the other day where they said something Trump said and said it was Biden. And then the people were like, "Yes, yes, that is a terrible bleach. Are you kidding? What an idiot." And then he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry. That was Trump said that." And they're like, "Well, the man has a point." Like a second later. And he did this with like 10 different things. And you're sitting there like, and I don't think these people had they weren't trying to be tricky. Their brain chemistry they couldn't do it. And, it was really, I'm always astonished by it, how well it works. And it works because it's an online medium, is an addictive. It's like, Mark Benioff called it cigarettes. I think when he did it at the time, people were losing their minds when he told me that. But I'm like, yeah, you're pretty much right.
So
More like
what's
crack,
so
actually.
what yeah, what is the solution for polarization and media diets that really convince people of things that aren't true,
Mhm.
or you know make them hold fast to these certain positions like your mom did?
Mhm.
And what do we do about the future of media? Let's start with the first question. I mean,
Okay.
what can be done? I was on the Aspen Commission for Disinformation.
You
We
were,
made
I
all these
remember.
recommendations. We
We
asked for
had them
more
at Code.
transparency,
Mhm.
for Facebook and
Algorithmic
yeah,
transparency.
yeah, exactly. Well, actually, not even algorithm transparency, Cara, just like the inner working. So researchers could really study
Hmm.
the phenomenon that we're talking about, or how these places work and how they distribute and amplify certain information.
Hmm.
But it seems like nothing has
No,
been
why
done.
should they? Why? Because at this point, these companies are money-making, shareholder-focused companies. Let's just be honest about it. That's what they're doing. And they control everything, by the way. They're the richest. Look, NVIDIA's now at $2 trillion. It's a mixed chips. It's like $2 trillion. Apple's trillions of dollars. Microsoft's, they own AI because it's so expensive, where we're going next. So they have unlimited funds and no consequences for anything they do. And we have that now, to me, they're like, aren't you mad at the tech companies? I'm like, you know what? They're doing what they do. Like, this is how they're sharks. Sharks gonna shark, kind of thing. At this point, we need to do something about the sharks, or put them in a pen, or figure out a way to have shark repellent or something. But it's up to our elected officials now to do something when they haven't. They just haven't. Nothing.
Well, will they ever? And if not, why?
Money, the deleterious effects of money on politics. Who has the most money? Tech companies, right? That's one. Two is they seem low. The partisanship that was created by these tech companies, I think in part, not completely, has now been so they can't agree on anything. Instead they want to go dunk on Twitter. You think you're going to get any cooperation out of Marjorie Taylor Greene? I'm sorry. Good luck. Talk about someone who's been totally addled by the internet and the attention. Talk about a malignant narcissist who is hopped up on the social media. There you go. There she is. Welcome to our next public official. Meanwhile, you have people like Mike Gallagher, who I don't agree with Mike Gallagher on a lot of stuff. I think his gay stuff is really problematic and troubling. But at the same time, what a smart legislator about all kinds of issues. He's leaving.
I know.
Ken Buck is leaving.
Yeah.
He's from Ohio. He's from
Ohio. Yeah.
I think it's Ohio. Yeah.
I thought it was Wisconsin. Am I crazy?
Maybe Wisconsin. He's terrific. I did a great interview with her. He's so smart. I don't agree with him, but I can have a good discussion with him about things to be done. He's throwing his hands up, like, not going to do this. And he's an important figure. Ken Buck, another person who's talk about conservative. I got to tell you, fighting the good fight. Like, this is a lie. This was a lie. This is like, he learned about the internet with Dave Cicilline. You couldn't put together two more, David, this gay, blue Democrat, and Ken Buck, this red Coloradans, but they both cared about the truth, right? Well, he's leaving. David Cicilline left, and so what we're left with is a lot of people, it's just, I often, the Yeats poem of slouching towards Bethlehem, waiting to be born. That's what we have. Years ago, I'll stop my grant because I got to go soon. But
no, I know, but keep going.
Google. I think the moment in the book that I like the best is when Google tried to take over Yahoo search, as you recall. I was writing a lot of no, and it was during the Obama administration, which bear hugged these people. By the way, this is not a Republican Democrat thing, and they all bear hug them, especially definitely the Obama people, right? And they were trying to basically control Yahoo. They couldn't buy it, but they could have done their business. It was just ridiculous. They were going to have 99.9% of the search market. It was crazy. I've never agreed with Microsoft on anything. And I was like, they are correct, sir. They cannot have this much. At that time, it was the biggest income generator of the internet, what they were doing in search. And I wrote a piece and I used a Dr. Seuss thing as a joke. And then I said a line where I said, at least Microsoft knew they were thugs. And this was referring to their previous attempts to control the software platform through Windows, which I had written about at the Washington Post. And one of the founders called me up, and I literally can't write, probably was Larry, because he was the one who talked the most about serious issues like this. And he said, you know us, we're not bad people, right? We're not bad people. We wouldn't know we would handle it well. I'm like, you know what? Here's the problem, because you didn't go to school enough. You didn't take history classes. I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about the next person. And I quoted Yeats, where I said, some rough beast is slouching towards Bethlehem, waiting to be born. This is Bethlehem. There's a beast coming, and it will be here. And they were like, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh, forget it. Like, forget it. I'm always quoting like poetry. And
a terrible beauty is born.
Terrible beauty. Yeah, right. And so, so I said this, and I said, and they had the "Don't be evil" thing. Remember, in their as their motto when they went public. And I said, I don't think you're evil, but there is evil coming. Like, and welcome, welcome Donald Trump, who used this medium for his advantage. There was always, it didn't matter if it was Donald Trump, someone, the Chinese, the Iranians, white nationalists, they were coming for this because it was perfect. It was a perfect way to finally crawl out from under rocks and take over people's minds. Finally, they had a vehicle.
It sounds like you think the genie is out of the bottle and
I
there's
don't.
no.
No, because look, remember Standard Oil ran everything, corrupted everything, decided everything from one person. AT&T, Standard Oil, the train monopoly. We've always been subject to power consolidating and trying to manipulate everybody's lives. And there's huge damage that was done by each of those monopolies, each of them in their own way, whether they mutated cities or people worked in terrible conditions. We don't have to put up with this. We don't. And we
And
just
you
need elected
who's going to
officials
fix
to
yeah,
pass
who's going to fix it if all these people are leaving and other people are thriving as on the way
someone.
things are?
I don't know. That's the problem. Like they have all these bills that they could pass. Look, right now, one of the biggest issues right now around free speech is right in front of the Supreme Court today. On these laws that these ridiculous attorney generals from Florida and Texas are trying. I can't believe I'm on the tech people's side, but they want the government to control political speech. And as I read the First Amendment, Google can control political speech. The state of Florida cannot, even to tell them they can't. And they throw around words like censorship and they abuse the First Amendment in ways that are, both sides do that, by the way. But it seems to me that we need to put in place a range of things, privacy laws, redo the antitrust bills, encourage government research, government investment in all kinds of innovation, allow new companies to come. That's our strength. Our strength isn't 7 large companies. They're called the Magnificent Seven now. That's not our strength. They're not our strength. Our strength is a small little group of people coming up with a great idea in a garage. And I'm not romantic about this stuff, but it is. That's what makes America different. That's why we led the internet age, not because we have the biggest national heroes, And so I'm hoping at some point, I thought this stuff around girls and kids and pornography would work. I thought the self-esteem would work. Thought Frances Haugen would work. At some point, regular people are going to be, this is enough. We're all hopped up on this crap. And there's all sorts of good things that could come of it, like start to lean into cancer research and healthcare and climate change tech and things like that. Why do we have to have all the bad things that it brings?
I know you have to go, but before
Mhm.
you do, I was talking to
Mhm.
my friend Kevin Goldman, who was a media writer for the Wall Street Journal. I don't know if you
Mhm.
know Kevin, but he's
I
like,
don't.
ask Cara about the future of newspapers. I was going to say, I'm going to ask Cara about the future of media. We see the fragmentation of the media
Mhm.
landscape. We see, traditional journalism imploding. We
Mhm.
see lots of actual fake news, not just what Donald Trump calls it,
Mhm.
crawling all over the internet. When you look out on the horizon, Cara, since you're so good at looking at the big picture
Mhm.
and identifying trends, what is the future of media in your view?
It's just going to be different. I think I sound much tougher on media, but it's the news business. It needs to be a business. You can't not be a business. And so look what you've done. You've built a little media company, haven't you? You're doing good. You're employing people. You're having
Yeah,
influence. Your costs are in line with your output. Like your revenues and costs are in line, or else you'd be out of business, right?
right.
No one's going to like fund Katie Couric to negative numbers. It's not going to happen for a while. So they just have to be different. The way they did things before, every business changes. There used to be a very thriving stagecoach business. There used to be telegrams. Well, guess what? They don't exist. I have I don't think I put this in the book, but my kids, we were walking on the street in LA, which is unusual in and of itself, and there was a payphone there. It was an old payphone, and it was all, hanging, the thing was hanging down, didn't work. And one of my kids, he was at the time, he was 6 or 7. He's like, "What's that?" And I said, "Oh, it's a payphone." And I hadn't used one in a long time
I
either,
saw
right?
one on a show recently and I
Yeah.
was like, wow.
Oh, how?
Yeah.
Right, right. And I said, "Well," he goes, "What did you do?" And I said, "Well, you stood there and you put money in or credit card sometimes. That was later. And then you called people and That's where, if you were out, that's where you had to call people, but otherwise people couldn't reach you if you were out of your house. And he looked at me and he goes, "That's filthy." And I said, "Yes." Like that was his first reaction. And I was like, and then I started thinking, and I was talking to them. I go, what happened to all the people that used to service these? What about the people that made these? What about like, there was a whole infrastructure and business. It's the same thing with news. You're just going to have to change and make products that where the costs are in line with the revenues. Unfortunately, a lot of the big media companies, because Facebook and Google have eaten up all digital revenues, and you didn't get tech enough, soon enough, fast enough, you need to, I'm sorry, you have to change the cost structure and or make something that people will pay for so you can have the cost structure you have. That is really hard for reporters to do. You have to embrace some AI stuff that makes it more efficient. You just do. Some of it is going to help make things more efficient. But I'm very heartened by people like me and like you and like Platformer with Casey Newton, all kinds of things. Casey has enormous influence. He has 2 people and he's doing great, right? Well, that's small, but it's not nothing. I see that, or else you're gonna have a couple of big places like that'll consolidate, like the New York Times, which sort of has become its own news monopoly. At the same time, it's not that big. It's not that big.
Yeah.
It's just a smaller business, Katie. That's all it
Well,
is.
I always think that, and this gets back to the polarization issue, that mass media is an oxymoron. This notion of
Mhm.
monoculture, of
Mhm.
a shared experience,
It's over.
that actually contributes to polarization, though, because
It
everyone is
does.
creating their own media ecosystem.
They are. But at the same time, Katie, let's just like be honest. Like you worked for the networks for years. You came up networks. I was arguing about that people were going to make years ago. I was saying there's going to be all kinds of media from all kinds of people because everyone suddenly has tools and there's all this creativity out there
No,
that
and I
has to go
love that. That's a
go
positive,
through go through
definitely.
your gateways. And they're like, well, it's going to be very different because the gatekeepers are this. I said, you know what? The gatekeepers used to be 12 white men on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Do we really want to take our cues from them? We don't. That wasn't the right thing either. It just happened to work for the time it was
No,
in.
I
So
agree. The people who were the gatekeepers were not ideal, but I still believe in the need for gatekeeping,
that
and
is true.
for editing, for ascertaining what's actually accurate and
Mhm.
truthful. And I think, it's the wild, wild west now. Anybody can say something, and unfortunately, too many people are willing to believe it.
Right, except that I think I am of the opposite belief. I think especially young people, and you have young
Yeah,
adults, your children are young adults. My older sons are young adults. I think they're very savvy. I think they know a lot about stuff. I think they can ascertain the differences. I don't think they're tricked easily. One of the things, do you remember when we were growing up when they said the TV was the boob tube?
oh yeah, of
Remember?
course.
Right?
My mom
You're
used
gonna
to call it that.
your mind is gonna turn
Turn
to
off the boob
mush.
tube.
You're gonna turn to mush. Did you turn to mush, Katie? No. And also TV's pretty good now, right? Look at music. Music was under siege by digital and they figured it out. Now it's a pretty thriving industry. Well, we'll figure it out. That's what we're gonna do. And to every reporter I say, I'm so sorry, but this happened to the farming people. This happened to the manufacturing people. And it
This
doesn't hurt
happened to
any
the people who
less.
operated and made the teletype machines.
That's right. So guess what? It's time to change. And unfortunately, because we live, or we just have the government pay for everything. That's the other way to go, right? Have the government pay for media. That's not happening in this country anytime soon at a massive level because of the polarization. And it just probably shouldn't, right? So I don't know. You just make a business and start to grow it is the only way to stay ahead. That is the only way to do it and continue to like I believe, and I think you do. I believe in substantive media, and I think there's a market for it. I really, really do. And I'm not going to hit everybody, but I'm going to make a business out of it. And then, that's how business. That's what's great about this country. It's about innovate. There's no place on earth like the United States around innovation. There isn't. There just isn't. I've been all over the globe. I've seen all the places. And there's an innovative spirit in this country that exists. So let's find it everywhere it is and encourage it so that we don't have to have top down, our world isn't shaped by Mark Zuckerberg. I don't, look, great, really nice, but honestly, it shouldn't take him 2 years to figure out anti-Semitism is a problem unchecked, right? That's how
Right.
long it took him. So let's get lots of voices happening. Let's get a lot of people. And I do think, I don't know, I have a confidence that journalists will be just fine.
I hope so, because they're
Yeah,
so important,
they are.
and your voice is so important
Thank
too,
you.
Cara, to make sure that people really know what's going on.
Wow.
The book is called Burn Book, A Tech Love Story. Cara, thank you. This was so
Thank
fun. I
you,
could talk
Katie,
to you
as
for
always.
hours, but
Well, you might. I will. I have an idea for you. I'll call you later.
okay.
Okay.
All
I got
right.
to run
Thanks,
though.
Cara.
Okay.
I
All
know
right.
you do.
Thanks. All
Call
right.
me. Bye.
Thank you. I will. Bye.